birth control or getting birth control coverage in your health care plans, which is now required by Obamacare, by the President's health care plan. For example, Governor Kane made a point of his staff of calling us and making sure we know that. It's about whether there should be a broad religious exemption for churches, universities, and hospitals that are religious and do not believe in birth control or against it as a matter of sin, if you will.
And he's the constitutional authority that I turn to whenever available. So what is the constitutional issue involved here?
There really isn't a constitutional issue involved in this issue.
But employers must abide by employment law. There are federal laws that apply to all employers.
So he's arguing that he's going further than the president on this thing.
Yes.
Than HHS.
Yes.
He says, in other words, you can go into a little convent or a little rectory and you can say you must buy this kind of insurance.
Well, I don't know that I'm not going to put words in his mouth.
Well,
what he was saying last night was that this rule, as applied to employers, again.
Let's see. Well, this goes to the Supreme Court. I think he'll lose.
But Chris, I think
the First Amendment of the Constitution prohibits establishment of religion. That is, you can't have the government saying you're going to have to follow certain religious beliefs. And it guarantees free exercise. That means everybody's free to exercise the religion that they choose. There isn't anything in the Constitution that says an employer, regardless of whether you are a church employer or not, isn't subject to the same rules as every other employer.
Minimum wage.
Minimum wage, safe working conditions, workmen's compensation, age restrictions. You could have a religion that says we believe that everybody, when they're 60 years old, ought to go off and contemplate their next life. And so people shouldn't work after 60. That doesn't give that religion an exemption from the rules against age discrimination.
This is just simple labor law.
This is simple.
Labor requires certain conditions in the workplace and so forth. This is one of those.
And tax law and workman's comp law. I mean, there are all sorts of laws that apply to every employer in this country. And you don't exempt religious employers just because they're religion. You're not asking anybody in the Catholic Church or any other church to do anything other than simply comply with the normal laws that every employer has to comply with.
And so when you say the exercise of the religion, if the Catholic Church's position, which 100% of American Catholics ignore and think is ridiculous, and they've never respected it, and it is a man-made invention because contraception is a man-made invention of the 20th century. This pill we're talking
on the other way in terms of the breadth of the exemption.
Well, I don't know. I just think that I go back to the point I made before. I think that, it's amazing to me that it took them 2 or 3 days to point out that this is the law of the land in 28 states already.
It's not the law of the land. The law is those requirements are not the same as this. I've gone through this. That's what the White House is putting out. Get that established independently of the White House. Just
talking about didn't exist, and so if the Catholic Church says we teach that you should not use this, and only Rick Santorum doesn't, the court would not see it as conflicting with the church's exercises by saying to that same church as an employer, you have to buy this health insurance policy that includes this clause here.
No, because, for example, the law wouldn't say to a Catholic hospital, for example, that you've got to do these acts that are contrary to religion, perhaps an abortion or something like that. They would, however, say to that hospital, you've got to treat your employees consistent with the law. You've got to give them workman's compensation. You've got to
I mean, an example could be like
you
could have a devout Catholic who says, that's okay, I'm a devout Catholic, I'm the janitor here, you don't have to pay me when I work 10 extra hours, and labor law comes in and says, now wait a minute.
You've got to pay him.
Yeah.
And you've got to give him health insurance, and you've got to give him workman's comp insurance.
How do you think this Supreme Court would react to this set of facts as we currently know them? And would the case, it sounds to me like the case would have trouble getting all the way up there.
I think this case would have trouble getting to the court. This is an election year, all right? And people are looking for election year issues. If this weren't an election year, you wouldn't have this hoorah right now. Look, New York. We're sitting in New York right now. New York's had this law. Religion isn't threatened. The Catholic Church is doing very well in New York.
With exemptions. Does it have the same kind of exemptions
as the federal? It has the same kind of exemptions as the federal law. That is, exemptions for church employees, not hospital employees. If the Catholic Church owns a restaurant, those employees aren't exempt. If they own a hospital, those employees aren't exempt. If they own a university, those employees aren't exempt. But if it's a true religious institution, those employees are exempt.
Now, we had a religious practice, a religious-based practice outlawed in this country. Polygamy was outlawed in the 1870s. How did that happen? Because that was an exercise of a religious practice.
Because the Constitution has never prohibited Congress or the state legislatures from imposing limits that apply to everybody. In other words, you may have a religion that believes in sacrificing animals.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that you're going to get an exemption from the anti-cruelty to animals laws.
Right. Okay.
As long as you have laws